Chosen one, what if I told you that the entire course of your future, your calling, your destiny, your divine assignment, might hinge on a single day? Not a day of action or achievement, not a day of public success or applause, but a day of silence, a day of solitude, a day spent entirely alone inside, in a world that constantly demands your attention, where every buzz, beep, and notification pulls you further from your purpose. What if the most revolutionary act you could take was to shut it all off and be still? What if the greatest battle you will ever face isn't against the pressures of society or the people who misunderstand you, or even your toughest adversaries, but the storm that brews within your own soul when you're finally quiet enough to hear it? Let me tell you a story. Alex was the person everyone wanted to be around. Charming, spontaneous, always busy. His life was a blur of events, messages, and movement. He thrived on interaction, on applause, on the next thrill. But inside, something didn't feel right. He had followers, but not fulfillment. He had momentum, but no direction. One day, an elder, a man who had walked a deeper path, challenged him with a strange task. Spend one day alone, no phone, no noise, no people, just you and your soul. At first, Alex laughed, but curiosity got the better of him. He tried it. That single day became the most pivotal turning point in his life. Not because something dramatic happened outside, but because something profound awakened within. You see, chosen one, in the noise of the world, your soul gets drowned out. From the moment we wake up, we are pulled into a world engineered to keep us externally focused. Likes, news feeds, responsibilities, expectations. Everything around you is fighting for your attention, and yet the most important voice you need to hear is whispering within. When you choose solitude intentionally, you're not isolating yourself, you're reconnecting, you're creating space for divine insight, for truth to rise to the surface, for healing to take root. Solitude isn't a punishment, it's preparation. The ancient mystics, prophets, and even Christ himself withdrew before great moments of destiny. Moses spent 40 days alone on Mount Sinai before receiving the law. Jesus went into the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Paul was isolated before spreading the gospel. History shows us isolation often precedes revelation. Psychologically, this makes sense too. Studies in neuroscience have shown that solitude helps reduce cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases self-awareness, memory consolidation, and emotional clarity. When you remove external input, your brain begins to reorganize, prioritize, and process unresolved thoughts. Spiritually, it's even deeper, because when everything else is stripped away, you can finally hear the still, small voice of God, the one that doesn't shout over noise, but waits patiently in the silence. And here's the truth, most people are terrified of that silence. They keep moving because they don't want to feel. They keep talking because they don't want to hear. But you, chosen one, are not most people. You were called to a higher walk, and sometimes that path begins not with a step outward, but inward. A single day alone may seem small, but it's a gateway to transformation. It's the moment your inner compass begins to point true north. It's where clarity begins, where healing begins, where purpose ignites. So, if you've been feeling out of sync, off course, or like something vital is missing, maybe it's not something you need to find out there. Maybe it's waiting inside in the silence. Let this be your challenge. One day, just one. No phone, no noise, no distractions. You'll be amazed at what rises up in the stillness. Not weakness, but strength. Not confusion, but clarity. Not loneliness, but divine presence. So breathe, chosen one. You're not losing time. You're reclaiming your future. Let's begin. Point 1. Reconnecting with your divine architect. First things first, chosen ones. When you intentionally step away from the chaos of the world, you're not just isolating yourself, you're aligning yourself. In a culture that glorifies hustle, urgency, and the constant dopamine buzz of social media, unplugging might seem counterintuitive, even radical, but make no mistake, it's one of the most spiritually intelligent decisions you can make. We live in a world where the average person checks their phone over 80 times a day, and notifications have rewired our brains to seek instant gratification. According to a study from the University of California, Irvine, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to regain focus after an interruption. Multiply that by dozens of distractions throughout the day, and it's no wonder your spirit feels scattered, anxious, and even drained. Your soul has been whispering, "Step away," because clarity doesn't come through chaos, it waits in silence. And when you finally pull away from the noise, you're not retreating in weakness, you're stepping into strength. As a chosen one, this withdrawal is more than rest. It's a spiritual reset. It's not laziness or avoidance, it's intentional alignment. You're not just being still, you're entering the divine boardroom. This is where heaven speaks. This is where spiritual blueprints are handed out. But here's the paradox. God doesn't shout over static. The Holy Spirit, as described in 1 Kings 19:12, is a still, small voice, not a roar, not a billboard, a whisper. And you can only hear a whisper when the room is quiet. That's why solitude isn't loneliness. It's a sacred strategy. It's the quiet place where revelations are birthed, visions are clarified, and healing begins. In spiritual psychology, this practice is called intentional withdrawal, and it's woven into nearly every major spiritual tradition. Jesus withdrew to lonely places to pray. Moses climbed Mount Sinai alone to receive divine instruction. The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree in solitude until enlightenment came. What do all these figures have in common? They didn't find their purpose in the crowd, they found it in stillness. The crowd carries distraction, ego, and noise. The mountain carries silence, presence, and truth. And here's the truth. Divine revelation almost never comes in the middle of chaos. It comes when you quiet everything else long enough to hear what's been speaking all along. And this isn't just mystical talk, it's backed by science. When you're bombarded with noise, your nervous system goes into overdrive. Stress hormones like cortisol surge, and your body switches into fight or flight mode. That's survival, not strategy. But when you pull away, when you meditate, pray, or simply sit in silence, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. Your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, and your brain shifts from reactivity to reflection. Specifically, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for insight, decision-making, and spiritual awareness, becomes more active. This isn't just spirituality. This is neuroscience meeting the divine. You're literally rewiring your brain to become more present, more aware, and more aligned. And this is where it gets real, chosen one. Once you've cleared the channel, something sacred begins to happen. Divine downloads begin to flow into your spirit, unprompted, unmistakable, and deeply alive. You'll have an idea for a project that aligns perfectly with your purpose. You'll feel the courage to start that business, write that book, have that conversation, or finally forgive someone you never thought you could. These aren't random thoughts. These are spiritual seeds planted by a higher intelligence, cultivated in silence. Your inner world becomes fertile ground for revelation. You begin to move not from pressure, but from purpose. But let's be honest, most people won't understand this process. That's because the average person avoids silence. They fear what they'll find there. In the silence, they're confronted by their wounds, their truth, and the parts of themselves they've buried beneath distraction. But you, chosen one, you were built for truth. Silence doesn't scare you, it calls you. You don't numb the pain, you face it. You don't run from purpose, you pursue it. This is why your journey feels different, why your process seems slower. You're not rushing toward noise, you're walking with wisdom. And when you re-emerge from that sacred space after days, weeks, or even months of spiritual incubation, something about you has changed. People will notice. Your energy shifts. Your eyes hold more depth. Your words carry more weight. Your presence calms the room, and your silence speaks volumes. And while many will be inspired, some will be uncomfortable, because your light, even when quietly shining, reveals the shadows in others. You didn't come back with flashy announcements or dramatic speeches. You simply different. And that difference, that alignment, it threatens the status quo of everyone still hiding behind the noise. So take your time. Don't rush back into the whirlwind of notifications, comparisons, and chaos. Sit a little longer in the presence. Light a candle, open your Bible, breathe, listen. You're not missing out, you're tuning in. And when the world asks where you've been, just smile. You were in the strategy room with God, because you, chosen one, don't move just to move. You wait, you listen, you discern. And then when the whisper comes, you walk, not in fear, not in confusion, but in purpose. Every step divinely guided, every move is spirit-led, and that, more than anything, is your power. Point 2, The spiritual reset, fasting from the mundane, chosen. 1. Have you ever noticed how the world tugs at your soul like a hyperactive toddler, always demanding your attention? Scroll through this, compare yourself to that, check your likes and watch who's winning, who's glowing and who's more successful. It's a constant, exhausting tug of war, not just on your mind, but on your spirit. And that right there is your sign. That constant noise, that endless pressure, that's not just life, it's your wake-up call. You're not being invited to slow down just for rest. You're being summoned to something deeper, something sacred. This is not a timeout. This is a spiritual fast. And no, it's not just about food. This is about feasting on clarity, fasting from chaos. Traditionally, a fast meant going without food to cleanse the body or seek divine intervention. But spiritually, a fast is much more than skipping meals. It's about starving the distractions that cloud your purpose. It's a detox of the soul, a reset of the mind. When you engage in a spiritual fast, you're choosing to silence the static of the world so you can hear the whisper of God. It's about stepping back from the social media rabbit holes, from toxic conversations, from the endless to-do lists, not because you're lazy, but because you're realigning. You're intentionally making space for divine direction. You're not just resting, you're recharging your spiritual frequency. Think of this like rebooting a computer. Over time, too many tabs open, slow everything down. Your mind, your heart, your spirit, they need a refresh. The average person today receives over 34 gigabytes of information every day, from news alerts to social feeds. That's like reading 174 newspapers daily. Your brain was never meant to operate under that kind of pressure. When you fast from all that noise, you begin to restore your ability to hear, see, and sense what truly matters. Neuroscience backs this up. When you step into silence, the brain activates the default mode network, the region responsible for self-reflection, empathy, and spiritual awareness. In simpler terms, silence doesn't mean emptiness. It means access to deeper truths. And let's talk purpose. You weren't created to be a follower of trends. You weren't born to keep up. You were born to wake others up. But you can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't lead if you're lost in the noise. That's why fasting isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for the chosen one. You need discipline to withdraw, courage to disconnect, and faith to believe that stepping back is actually a way to move forward. When you fast from gossip, from comparison, from validation seeking, you're not missing out. You're making room, you're clearing the runway so the spirit can land something new in your life. You're not withdrawing in weakness, you're preparing for spiritual warfare. You're switching off the world so heaven can tune in. This fast also serves another powerful purpose, reminding you that your worth isn't rooted in your productivity or popularity. The world pushes a message: hustle harder, grind louder, stay seen. But the kingdom speaks a different language. Be still and know. Stillness isn't idleness, it's intimacy. When you're still, God speaks. When you're silent, the noise fades and the signal becomes clearer. Suddenly, the opinions of others lose their grip. The need to compete vanishes, and the truth, your truth, rises to the surface like gold refined in fire. During a spiritual fast, you'll notice something else start to shift: your relationships. The more you unplug from what drains you, the more sensitive you become to what nourishes you. Some friendships will fade, some habits will feel heavy. That's not punishment, it's promotion. You're shedding the layers that no longer fit your next level. When you stop feeding on spiritual junk, you naturally stop tolerating what's toxic. What once entertained you now irritates you. That's growth, that's alignment, that's divine evolution. And when you emerge from this fast, something undeniable will have changed. You'll glow differently, not from the filters or the hype, but from divine alignment. People will look at you and say, "There's something about you." They won't be able to name it, but you will. You'll know you pulled away from the world, and in doing so, you pulled closer to God. You didn't just catch your breath. You caught your breakthrough, and now you're walking with clarity, peace, and a fire that can't be faked. So no, this isn't just a quiet day or a break from screens. This is spiritual strategy. This is kingdom alignment. This is the sacred pause before the divine release. You're not hiding, you're being hidden. You're not resting, you're being readied. And when the fast is over, you won't return as the same person. You'll come back refined, realigned, recalibrated, reignited. You'll come back anointed. Point 3. Confronting the inner chaos and finding peace. Okay, let's be real, chosen one. When you first sit in silence, expecting some divine download or peaceful enlightenment, what do you actually get? Static noise, a mental circus. Your brain starts tossing out random thoughts like a monkey flinging bananas in a meditation retreat. You close your eyes expecting inner peace, and instead you're wondering if you left the stove on, if that side eye your boss gave you means you're getting fired. And classic chosen one doubt alert, if maybe, just maybe, you're not actually chosen, but just a sleep-deprived weirdo talking to yourself in a quiet room. Welcome to the hilarious, chaotic, and very real first step of spiritual clarity, facing the mental mess you've been avoiding for years. And here's the thing, this mess isn't a sign of failure, it's actually proof you're doing it right. Why? Because silence doesn't create chaos. It reveals it. All those fears, distractions, and half-buried insecurities were already living rent-free in your mind. Silence just turns on the lights. Most people run from that moment. They fill their lives with noise, music, scrolling, drama, gossip, busy work, because silence feels scary. But chosen ones? We don't run, we confront. We walk into the lion's den of our own thoughts and sit down like, all right, demons, let's talk. It's spiritual detox. And like any detox, it gets ugly before it gets beautiful. Studies in neuroscience back this up. When you sit still and allow your brain to wander, it activates the default mode network, DMN, the part responsible for introspection, memory, and self-evaluation. In other words, it's the system that says, here's everything you've been stuffing in the back of your mind for the past 15 years. Let's unpack that. And that unpacking process, that's where the healing begins. True peace isn't found in avoiding these thoughts. It's found in recognizing them, bringing them into the light, and surrendering them to God. That's what makes silence a divine battleground. And guess what? The enemy knows it. That's why your phone suddenly dings the minute you try to meditate. That's why you feel a strange urge to check the fridge every 5 minutes. Distraction isn't random, it's warfare. Because the moment you face yourself, you become dangerous. You become aligned. You tap into the still, small voice that's been drowned out by chaos, God's voice. And when do you hear it? Game over for fear. Now here's the funny part. Somewhere along this journey, maybe during the 78th intrusive thought, you start laughing. You start realizing how absurd it is that you've been letting these tiny, nagging fears dictate your life. Wait, I was actually stressed about that? The humor is part of the healing. It shows that you're no longer enslaved by the noise. You've zoomed out. You're watching the storm instead of being tossed by it. That's spiritual maturity. And eventually, after the monkey mind tantrum burns out, something sacred happens. Stillness. Not just on the outside, but within. It's subtle at first, like the soft hush after a thunderstorm. But then you realize, oh, this is peace. Not the peace the world gives, the one that depends on everything going right. No, this is the peace that passes all understanding, the kind that says, even if nothing changes outside me, I'm already safe inside. That's the kind of peace only God can give. That's the kind chosen ones are called to walk in. So if you're sitting there thinking your mind is too loud for silence, too broken for healing, too anxious for peace, relax. You're right on schedule. You're not failing. You're evolving. Keep sitting, keep facing, keep releasing, because on the other side of that chaos is clarity, and on the other side of that silence is power, the kind of power only the chosen ones can carry. Point 4, reigniting your creative spark. Chosen ones, here's a divine truth that most people miss. You were created in the image of the Creator, not a consumer, not a copycat, but a creator. That means within your very DNA, there's a blueprint to build, innovate, shape, express, and bring things into being that didn't exist before you. Creativity isn't just a skill. For the chosen, it's a spiritual mandate. You don't just get creative ideas, you receive them. They are divine downloads from a higher realm. But here's the catch, that frequency, that whisper from the source, it's not going to fight with your Netflix queue, TikTok scrolls, or the back-to-back noise of modern chaos. It's still, it's sacred, and it speaks only when you quiet the world long enough to listen. You see, consumption is easy. The world has conditioned people to consume from the moment they wake up. To open your eyes, check your phone, scroll, absorb, repeat. But what happens when you don't do that? What happens when you sit in stillness? When you stop the intake, a holy shift occurs. Suddenly your subconscious, which has been silently cataloging everything today, begins to surface. Ideas bubble up from the deep. Your soul stretches out and starts speaking to you in the language of vision, imagination, and inspiration. That's not a coincidence. That's divine technology. Science backs this up too. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, a set of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on the outside world. It lights up when you daydream, reflect, or rest. And this is where some of your most creative, intuitive, and insightful thoughts are born. In other words, when you shut the world out, you tune in to the highest frequency within you. Take this deeper. In Genesis, God created the universe in 6 days. Light, sky, land, creatures, all of it. And on the 7th day, he rested. He didn't rest because he was tired. He rested because rest completes the process. Rest is sacred. Rest is not lazy, it's creative soil. The 7th day was the moment of appreciation, reflection, and reset. You were made in that image. If you never pause, never go within, how can you reflect the divine rhythm of creation? And here's the wild part. When you do take that moment of sacred pause, when you unplug, isolate, go within, you don't become less. You actually become more. You align, you awaken. Suddenly ideas for books, songs, businesses, inventions, and movements rise up. You remember the vision God placed in your spirit long before the world tried to distract you out of it. Let's be real. The reason most people don't create is because they've numbed their capacity for original thought. They drown it with noise. But chosen ones, you were never meant to blend in with that noise. You are the silence after the storm, the sacred echo in the void. That's why so many of your breakthroughs come when you're alone, walking, praying, journaling, or just sitting in stillness. That's the realm where the divine blueprint reveals itself. You're not meant to simply consume culture. You're meant to create it. Your art, your story, your voice, they all carry God particles. And when you give them space to rise, you don't just express something cool. You become a mirror that shows others what's possible through God. You reflect the original creator. So the next time you feel the urge to scroll for the 100th time, pause. Ask yourself, am I consuming out of habit? Or am I blocking the voice that's trying to speak within me? Go sit in the quiet. Let your soul stretch. That stillness isn't empty. It's full of divine downloads waiting for you to stop and receive them. Chosen one, the world doesn't need another mimic. It needs your original light. So unplug, go within, create. Because when you create, you are closest to God. And that's when your true power awakens. Point 5, building spiritual stamina for the storms. Let's be honest, life isn't always easy. The world will throw storms at you that you never saw coming. Your day of solitude is your training ground. It's where you build spiritual stamina. Think of it like this. A boxer doesn't just show up on fight night. He spends countless hours alone in the gym, punching a bag, building endurance. When you spend a day intentionally strengthening your spiritual core, praying, reading scripture, reflecting, you are preparing for the storms. The world might hit you with a left hook of doubt or a right hook of anxiety, but because you've spent time building your stamina, you won't be knocked down. You'll stand firm, rooted in your faith and purpose. This quiet day is not about avoiding the fight, it's about winning it. Point 6, understanding your true calling. Let's be real. Chosen one, this life you're walking, it's not a cakewalk. It's not soft music and sunshine. It's trials, storms, long, lonely stretches where it feels like no one sees your growth but God. But let me tell you something that most people miss. Your solitude is not a setback. It's your secret weapon. Think about it. What do you think God is doing with you in those quiet hours? He's training you. You're not abandoned. You're being built. And the battlefield, it's not just out there in the world. It's in here, in your mind, your spirit, your soul. That's why your solitude matters so much. That's where your spiritual stamina gets forged like iron in fire. Now let's break it down. Have you ever watched a boxer in training? Not during the match. I mean before, when nobody's watching. He's in the gym, fists wrapped, dripping sweat, punching that heavy bag over and over again. He doesn't wait for fight night to get serious. He builds himself in the shadows. Same with you. Every day you choose prayer over panic, stillness over chaos, and the word over worry. You are preparing. You're conditioning your spirit. You're building spiritual endurance. And this isn't just poetic talk. It's neuroscience and faith colliding. Studies show that consistent spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, and scripture reading physically change the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the area linked to focus and decision-making, becomes stronger. The amygdala, your fear center, shrinks. Translation, the more time you spend in the presence of God, the more resilient you become. So when life throws that left hook of doubt or anxiety comes swinging from the right, you don't crumble, you withstand, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. And let's talk storms. Every chosen one faces them. Spiritual warfare, that's real. Emotional valleys, very real. But here's the catch. The enemy doesn't come after empty vessels. He comes after threats. You're being attacked not because you're weak, but because you're loaded with destiny. But God doesn't send warriors to war untrained. That's why you've had seasons of isolation. That's why you've had to walk alone. That's why the phone stayed dry when you needed someone to check on you. Because God wasn't just removing distractions. He was sharpening your senses, teaching you how to hear Him in the silence. And don't get it twisted. Your quiet day isn't about avoiding the fight, it's about winning it. It's about preloading your spirit with the peace, wisdom, and discernment you'll need when the chaos hits. It's like building spiritual muscle memory, so that when the storm comes, and oh, it will come, you don't default to fear, you default to faith. You're not out here reacting like the world does. You've trained, you've studied, you've prayed, you're ready. You might think you're just sitting on your bed, Bible open, eyes closed in prayer, but in the spiritual realm, that's a war cry. That's armor going on. Those are weapons being sharpened because, chosen one, the real flex isn't who can shout the loudest. It's who can stay the calmest in the storm, who's built enough endurance in secret that when the public battle hits, they don't flinch. So next time you find yourself alone feeling forgotten, remember the greats were always forged in obscurity. David killed the lion and the bear before he ever faced Goliath. Jesus fasted 40 days in the wilderness before he stepped into his ministry. Don't waste your training ground, chosen one. Use it. Strengthen your core. Study your calling. Pray like the fight's already here. Because sometimes it is, and sometimes you are the one standing in the gap for someone else's victory too. The quiet day, that's not a day off. That's the gym, the lab, the temple, and when you come out of it, oh, they'll wonder how you're still standing, but you'll know the truth. You didn't survive the storm. You were built for it. Point 7, the power of godly contemplation. Finally, chosen ones, let's talk about contemplation, not just as a practice, but as a holy portal that opens the floodgates of spiritual clarity and peace. See, in today's world of constant noise and scrolling, contemplation feels almost countercultural. But that's exactly what makes it powerful. The ancient prophets knew this. The mystics, saints, and seers throughout time all practiced it. From the quiet deserts where the desert fathers meditated, to the monasteries of Tibet, to the still caves where Elijah heard the whisper of God, not the thunder, not the fire, but the whisper, contemplation has always been a sacred weapon in the hands of the awakened. Contemplation isn't about zoning out, it's about zoning in. It's not the same as ordinary thinking or daydreaming. This is a form of spiritual attunement where your soul leans in and listens deeply. Scientifically, contemplation activates your brain's default mode network, the system tied to introspection, self-awareness, and empathy. When practiced regularly, it reduces cortisol levels, calms the amygdala, your fear center, and increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, boosting wisdom, clarity, and emotional regulation. Translation, you stop reacting to life and start responding with divine insight. That's not just mindfulness, that's God mindfulness. And when you dedicate even one full day to contemplation, chosen one, something supernatural begins to shift. You begin to move from a state of internal chaos to divine calm. You're not just trying to figure things out anymore, you're receiving revelation. You're not begging for clarity, you're becoming a vessel that clarity flows through. In that sacred stillness, God speaks, not always with words, but with alignment, peace, and presence. When you meditate on His promises like, I will never leave you nor forsake you, or be still and know that I am God, you begin to rewire your inner world. Your spirit becomes anchored, not in circumstances, but in truth. And when your soul is anchored in truth, you can't be manipulated by fear, pressure, or confusion. Contemplation detoxes you from the mental clutter and emotional toxins the world throws at you daily. It's like giving your soul a Sabbath bath. A reset, a restoration, a recalibration. Let's go even deeper. Contemplation is an act of spiritual rebellion against the world's programming. Everything around you is designed to keep you distracted, reactive, and overstimulated. Social media, constant notifications, crisis after crisis. It's a spiritual fog machine. But when you pull away and choose sacred silence, you pierce through that fog like a sword. You become fully awake, fully aware, and fully present. And in that state, you remember, I'm not just surviving, I'm chosen to walk in divine purpose. In contemplation, fear begins to lose its grip. Why? Because you start exchanging human logic for divine wisdom. You see, fear thrives in confusion, but contemplation brings clarity. Doubt grows in noise, but contemplation births confidence. The more time you spend contemplating God's character, His track record, and His love, the more unshakable you become. The world might still be chaotic, but you will move with peace like still waters. You'll speak with the calm authority of someone who knows who they are and who they are. So make no mistake, chosen one, this isn't just a day off, it's a day of spiritual war disguised as rest. This is your holy ground, your sanctuary, your secret chamber where strategies are revealed, wounds are healed, and identity is reinforced. Contemplation is how you charge your spiritual battery, how you realign your soul with your calling, and in a world that tries to drag you into noise, being still is your superpower. Use it. Watch the shift unfold. So, chosen ones, the next time you feel overwhelmed or like you're drifting without direction, remember this video. Remember the profound power of a single day spent inside, away from the noise with your Creator. It's not about isolation, it's about preparation. It's not about hiding, it's about finding. Your future, your purpose, your calling, it all depends on you taking that brave step inward. Now, I want to ask you, which of these 7 points resonated with you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content to help you on your spiritual journey. Remember, you were chosen for a reason. Now go find that reason and live it out loud.